All right, hope you got your brains fired up. It's time for the town meeting program, and we're going to be blinding you with science a bit. Welcome to our show, which is coming out on the 15th of June of 2026, and has to do with energy. Specifically, some things that a few very smart folks came to Cordova to learn about and teach and work with our highly innovative folks at Cordova Electric Cooperative. As you'll hear them say, they have a great deal of admiration for CEC's leadership and staff and for our community as a whole. So there's a lot of Cordova celebrating blended into this. And speaking of Cordovan entities, we have Cordova Wireless Communications as the sponsor of your local talk show, which is very appropriate because they are your local provider of cell phones and wireless data service. You're not shipping your money out to some other town. You're keeping it here, where it does us good, because we deserve that. Let me throw in that reminder, too, that if you ever have an idea for one of these shows, again, we do this on demand, rather than just dumping information which may or may not be of any value to anybody, just for the sake of doing it. So if you ever have an idea, if you'd like to be a guest or suggest one, or you have a topic you want us to try to find a guest to talk about, and I'll remind you again that we can read things, too. If you have something that you'd like to share, but talking isn't your favorite way to do it, you prefer to write it down and have us read it out, that's absolutely fine. For this program, I was approached by a guy involved in this Arctic 2 effort, which was working in Cordova to do a number of things. And it was interesting as I was visiting with the guests, things got kind of, because one of them, Daisy, is an engineer. I guess I should introduce the guests here first real quick. We'll be hearing from Daisy Huang, who has an engineering background, and then George Reising, who is more of an education specialist. And a lot of his work was done with local students. Something that was interesting about this interview is that I didn't have the amount of background information that I usually would have for doing one of these. It was just based on a conversation I'd had with somebody rather than like a written down summary. So I was going into it based on what was in my head, which is increasingly a dangerous thing to do. So we kind of, throughout the conversation, we kind of intermixed the education part and the technical part. And there was a lot of technical information in this. So I want to actually explain in advance a summary of what the topic is now that I have talked to George and Daisy, and then we'll play the recording. So it's sort of a spoiler in a sense. I'll give you an overview of what this is, and then you'll hear all the parts that led to this better understanding that'll come out in the recording. So here's down here in Cordova. There was a federally funded research effort called Arctic 2 that has been working directly with the community to tackle a challenge that many rural Alaskan towns face. We know all about this. We've talked about it, I don't know how many times over the decades. How do you make energy more reliable, more efficient, and ultimately more affordable? Cordova operates on what's known as an islanded microgrid, meaning it isn't connected to any larger power systems, and that creates some unique challenges, but also some opportunities, especially since the community can sometimes produce more hydropower than it needs right in that moment. Now, these researchers focused on Cordova Community Medical Center, tracking how electricity and heat are used throughout the year in one of the town's most critical facilities, obviously. By understanding when and how energy is used, they're identifying ways to better match that demand with available resources, particularly by finding opportunities to use surplus hydro instead of relying on diesel. The goal of the visit was improving energy resilience while moving toward cheaper and more accessible energy for the community. But it wasn't just about this technology. It also had this whole facet of connecting local students with real-world energy research, giving them a hands-on experience and helping to build a local workforce with the skills needed to support Alaska's energy future. And this is the part that was neat, of course, as we've heard a number of times, is that what people are learning in Cordova can then maybe help other small remote communities across the state, because we're good at local partnerships and applied research and workforce development. And we can be an example of how all those things can come together to create practical energy solutions. And that, again, is kind of the fun part. You'll hear towards the end of the recording how impressed they were with Cordova's ability to do that. As one of them you'll hear say for all of us to pull in the same direction. So, how was I able to tell you all of that? It was a result of this conversation with George Reising and Daisy Huang on the Town Meeting Talk Show, brought to you by Cordova Wireless Communications. George, you were first into the Zoom, so you get to go first as far as introducing yourself. Tell us about life as an Alaskan and your background and how you come to be with us.
Okay. My name is George Reising. I work for the University of Alaska Fairbanks for the Alaska Center for Energy and Power. And I came on with the university in 2014 as a high school math and science teacher in Seward. So they had a program called Upward Bound, and I was the Upward Bound coach, a local facilitator where I worked with students. And we got involved with some National Science Foundation projects. And one of them was called the Modern Blanket Toss. And the idea was teach students how to use really cool technology and give them a community project, and they'll go and do amazing things. And so we were working with drones. So students were building their own drones and doing mapping for the community, and it worked out really well. That program continued. I continued to coach. And then another National Science Foundation grant was awarded called the Teaching Through Technology, or T3 Alliance. And I was involved with that. I've been working with that ever since, kind of on the side as a high school coach and teaching other instructors, teachers how to do it. And then in 2022, I came on full-time with the university and made that career shift to help facilitate
Recording
this program.
in progress.
Oh, I guess recording is in progress. How wonderful. So, Daisy, same question to you. How do you come to be, what's your background in Alaska, and how do you come to be part of what we're talking about today?
My background is mechanical engineering. I moved to Alaska in 2006, and I went to grad school to get my PhD. So first of all, that's my first connection to energy. I was a starving student. I was still am living in a tiny dry cabin, trying to conserve as much as possible. And my last year, my funding source for my research ran out, and I looked for a job on campus so I could continue to feed myself, and ASAP was hiring staff engineers. So I was like, perfect. So I went to work for ASAP, and I thought this was the coolest thing ever, looking at energy issues. And so after I graduated, I continued to work at ASAP as a faculty scientist. But I also teach mechanical engineering, so that's kind of a cool integration, because I get to teach energy topics and my students love it. And I also learn from my students what are the most topical issues of the day.
All right. Well, it's a little intimidating to talk to incredibly smart people, but we're going to try and make our way through it here.
Are some really smart people joining?
Oh,
That's what I was going to say.
Oh, the humility. Oh, the self-deprecation.
Take my notes here.
Yeah. All right. So in terms of what brought you an entity that I presume is based out of the University of Alaska Fairbanks, what was it that brought you to Cordova? And maybe the background of the specific program is a good place to start with that. But obviously the Cordova angle is what we want to focus on. How'd you end up coming down to see us?
Cordova has a long history of being very innovative with technology in general and energy specifically. They were one of the first, they were very innovative with their hydro. They buried all their power lines. So now, as windy as it is in Cordova, they never have wind-caused outages, which is really awesome. And so they are the perfect place to do this kind of research. The folks in Cordova are also extremely cooperative. They're very forward-thinking. a lot of utilities are not as forthcoming with sharing data with researchers. And I understand why. They're concerned about security, they're concerned about their reputation if they report the number of outages they have each year. Every blip, every time your lights blink, that counts as an outage. And so the number of outages reported is actually a lot higher than people experience. And so power companies don't like people to know exactly how many outages they have. But Cordova has always been very forthcoming. They're just really, really great folks down there, and we like to do research with them.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've known Clay Copeland for many, many years, so it's fun to hear you say that, because even though I know it already, I like hearing other people mention that, and it always has amazed me, having lived in both Fairbanks and Cordova over the years, to really see how ahead of it the people that make the decisions there. Anything, George, to add to that as far as how you ended up in our community?
I think just that the small town nature of Alaska, period. I mean, big state, but there's a lot of interconnections. For example, Adam taught in Cordova, so you're working with an innovative community that you already have some roots in, and that makes it a lot easier. It's like you have partnerships and people who want to partner and support things, as opposed to working in another innovative community where you don't know anyone, and it's really hard to even get started, right? So there's a history of a Cordova connection there too, which I think is a big strength.
Sure. Well, as far as the project that you did, I'm seeing something called Arctic 2. What is? I mean, either one of you can take it first. What is that? How did it come to be, and what is its goal?
So Arctic is a program. It reaches across many organizations. It's not just the university. It's not just one group within the university. But this idea of an Arctic regional collaboration for technology, innovation, and commercialization. The idea is every one of these communities has people and industry and research and partners that can come together and support each other to make something bigger happen. And if we can get everybody in the same room, these key partners in the same room, really cool things can come out of it. And especially bringing, future workforce into that equation too. How do you make a community more energy resilient, right? Well, you need to bring in the youth, you need to bring in research, you need to bring in industry, and all these pieces. And so that's what this overall program is, because when you think about national defense, security, all these little remote communities across the Arctic, the Pacific, how do we increase security when things get messy and you need to quickly ramp up, these systems?
Okay, Daisy, anything to add?
No, I think that was a great answer. Thanks, George.
All right. Well, then we talked about Cordova being innovative and an overview of what your program is about. What was it specifically then, and Daisy, maybe if you want to start this time, what did you come to Cordova to do? What were you looking at and hoping to accomplish?
Well, the specific project that is being funded under Arctic under Arctic 2 is that we are looking at how to optimize the use of energy. For example, there are periods of time when the community loads are not that high, and yet there is a lot of hydro production potential. So they're actually spilling water. And so we have long been looking at where are places we could use this potential energy that is presently being thrown away. So loads that are currently carried by non-electrical sources, we wonder if we can electrify them. So Clay actually, brought the first electric car to Cordova years ago.
Yeah.
At the time, people thought, it's kind of goofy, but now, they're being adopted. And so the specific thing we're looking at is heat loads. So buildings that are heated by, burning oil, if you use electric heat to heat those buildings, could that actually end up with a lower overall cost since you're using the hydro? So we're looking at what loads can be electrified, and heat is one of them, and space heating is obviously a big one. And so in order to make this useful for other people besides just the community of Cordova, we need to find what is so-called a typical building and what is a typical heating situation.
Mhm.
And so the hospital was chosen to be that representative building, like any hospital in any, small town America. And so we chose the hospital to be metered for both its electrical usage and its thermal usage. And we are crunching that data right now,
Mm.
actually.
Mhm.
Uh, the It actually turned out to be another interesting thing to look at because a hospital is a critical load. It's one of those buildings that you really want to make sure that when there's an outage, it stays online. So it has its own generator. And the question is, how do you, again, optimize the power usage when there is an outage? Like maybe you don't need lighting in hallways in the X-ray facility because nobody gets X-rays when there's an outage, but
Yeah.
you want the ER to stay alive and you want people in critical care to stay alive. People on ventilators, those need to stay alive. Um, so how to optimize power dispatch strategies under crises is also an important issue. So
Sure.
all of these reasons all of these factors are great reasons to look at electrical usage of a hospital.
Okay. And same question to you, George. What specifically were you looking at in Cordova to apply this program to?
Just listening to what Daisy shared, like how she answered that question was a lot of technical vocabulary,
Mm-hmm.
right? So how do you make that digestible for the community and specifically the students who are in the workforce position, right? How do you get them aware of the situation right off the bat and thinking about innovative solutions? Communities like Cordova, everywhere, people like to support their youth, right? It's like, yeah, your students are working on a project. Oh, you're working on an energy project. So they're learning and they have to be able to digest these concepts like what's a critical load? What's a microgrid? Daisy, there's what, 212 some microgrids in Alaska? I mean, they're all over the place. And so when you think about this idea of like energy security or resilience, when things go down, or let's just say maybe diesel prices are going to go up by 50%, right? How do you start getting that workforce ready? Because a 16-year-old is going to be in the workforce in 2 years. And if they don't understand these basic concepts, that's an issue for a community. How can they help out? They might look at things differently. I mean, a lot of our students are just very eager to help, and they're not afraid to try different ideas, right? Oh, why don't we do it this way? Oh, no one's ever thought of that before because you haven't been in the industry for 35 years.
All right. So in terms of when you were in Cordova and looking at these things, and we'll stay with you maybe, George, how long were you there, and maybe take us kind of step by step through what you were actually doing and looking at and learning along the way?
Yeah, for the purpose of this Arctic 2 grant, funding thing that we're talking about, there's really two parts to this. There's a T3 club, a group of students who are at the middle school and high school who are engaged in this T3 programming, learning about technologies and that kind of thing. And they have the opportunities to engage in a statewide energy club. They can earn badges, they can go on trips, do summer programs, really kind of dive into concepts that are not part of a traditional secondary curriculum, right? It's not a math camp, but they're going to use math in order to figure these things out. So that's been going on for a number of years. And then the second part is when we've had opportunities to bring other students to Cordova. So I think it was in February of 23, we did an energy auditing workshop conference in Cordova around the ice worm. And students had to learn what energy auditing is and how to make recommendations for efficiency, change outs to make upgrades like, oh, maybe we should get rid of this oil furnace that's inefficient. We should, redo some windows, change the insulation out and put in heat pumps, right? Especially with this other power source. And so like these hands-on projects where students are coming together and learning and then thinking, okay, now what's the next step of training? Oh, I want to be an engineer. Oh, I can go to UF. I could work with someone like Daisy, right? Cool. Or, oh, I need to go to trade school. Maybe I'll go to Job Corps. Maybe I'll go to AvTech, right? You're getting a chance for these students to from across the state to interact in a way that's real and hands-on and directly applicable to their community, right? So, okay, this is what we're learning. What do I want to do? What's my next step for workforce development? And then how can I take this message home?
All right. And I seem to remember, Daisy, when I was talking to the gentleman that set this up, that first approached me about talking with you folks, that there was some conversation around, again, if we've got surplus hydro, how can we utilize that, not let it just spill over, and maybe waste heat, recirculating that or reusing it somehow. I mean, what are some of the efficiencies that were discovered through this process while you were down here?
So efficiency actually has a technical meaning in engineering. I apologize. I keep nerding out. But efficiency is like energy output divided by energy input. So if you're using a renewable resource where you do not have fuel, technically your efficiency, well, it's not comparable to a fossil fuel. The way I would look at it is how many, I'm sorry, I'm just kidding. I think I would phrase it as how to improve overall efficiency of a system. So like if you have diesel integrated with the renewable, I would call efficiency kilowatt hours out per gallon of diesel.
Okay.
And if you have a renewable on the system, that can be huge. If your community is, 80% wind, then guess what? You have 5x the efficiency per gallon of diesel, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what we mean by optimizing hydro. Like right now, the water that's being spilled is not being used for energy, but if we can use it, we can offset more diesel. And the way people usually parameterize this is not by looking at technical efficiency. Like there is a way to calculate efficiency of a hydro plant. It's the height of the water column or the water pressure or the water flow rate. You convert that to energy and look at kilowatt hours per energy of water input. But that's not really something that ties to economics because we're not paying for the height of the water and we're not paying for the water flow rate. And so that's why when we look at efficiency of hybrid, renewable plus diesel systems, we look at still the overall efficiency per gallon of diesel. I'm sorry, what was the question?
No, that's fine. Have you ever heard of a podcast called The Joy of Why?
No.
You should definitely be a guest on that someday. I don't know how you get on it, but yeah, it's a very science, and everybody explains things in very technical terms. I always get a kick out of listening to it. But and I'm thinking about, though, how maybe efficiency wasn't the best word, but how to take advantage of energy assets that would otherwise become waste. For example, if there's a bunch of waste heat going out a stack, and I'm speaking as a layperson, say you got a bunch of waste heat that's going out a stack, recapturing that and somehow plugging it back in so you recapture that and you have less consumption of the raw resources. Or like we said, if there's more hydro, and I understand we have a pretty sophisticated battery farm, which was another innovation that came from CEC, and they're able to capture and store, at least for a limited period of time, excess hydro. But you've been talking about ways to somehow channel. So my question is about channeling waste back into the system in a way that it can be used instead of just going poof.
Right. Okay. So it's actually, there are multiple ways to use excess renewable generation. Obviously, one easy answer that you mentioned is batteries, but the problem is batteries are very expensive and there are losses. You input energy to the battery, you don't get out all the energy that you put in. So better if you can use the energy directly for a need that is currently being served by another electrical source. And so that's also a bit of a challenge because most energy uses are tied to time. Like I want to make my coffee when I want my coffee, not when the wind is blowing or when the sun is shining. And so that's why heat is actually the most common usage of excess renewable, because heat, is really big. Thermal mass is a thing that delays time. So for example, a lot of communities in southwestern Alaska, well, maybe not a lot, but several, 5 or 6, I think, they actually use excess wind to heat a ceramic a pile of ceramic bricks. And so when the wind is blowing, you heat up the pile of ceramic bricks. When your house gets below the thermostat temperature, you blow a fan over the ceramic bricks and you heat your house. So that's a way to decouple the energy usage from time. And that is why specifically in the hospital, we're looking at space heating and we're looking at domestic hot water heating. And that's a strategy that's already being used in Cordova. There are community buildings that have water tanks that used to be heated by diesel that are now being heated by electricity. So, in the Fairbanks sense, that sounds insane. Like, on what planet is electricity cheaper than burning the oil directly? Well, in Cordova, because the electricity is hydro.
Yeah. 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 So as you hear, George, as you hear her explaining this for the benefit of those of us that do not have that wonderful brain that she has, kind of the same question, was that part of what you were looking at, and was it successful in terms of capturing energy that would otherwise just evaporate and plugging it back in somehow?
I not so much for the work we're doing, although Daisy's point about these thermal masses is a really good one. And again, I think in other communities or towns that were part of the Arctic Grant, right? Kotzebue uses, first of all, there's no waste heat. Every bit of heat in Alaska could be captured and used for some purpose.
Yeah.
In every town, right? And what is it, Daisy? Correct me if I'm wrong. It's like 65 to 75% of the energy demands for every household in Alaska is heat. It's just the heating load.
80.
Mm-hmm. Right? So, I mean, there it is. It's like, okay, we can try to, how do we reduce that heat, that heat demand, or the heat demand is always going to be there, but how do we, be wiser about it? And I think about like my cup of coffee, and I just explained this to students. If this is your diesel, do you want this to last for a year or 2 years or 5 years? Like, how fast are you going to drink this cup? We're never going to get rid of it, and that's fine. But if from a security point of view, how often does that shipment come in, right? How long can you make it last? So if I can use this when I really need it, when it's really cold, there's no wind, there's no sun, there's no hydro because things are frozen. Okay, that's the time to use this cup of diesel. In the meantime, can we put in heat pumps that work 9 months a year that are going to run on sources that barely use diesel at all or no diesel at all? And I think trying to share these ideas with students and the community members too, it's not just part of the family conversation, right? How do you say, hey, this is how much it costs, right? What are we going to do about this?
And that's obviously how a lot of people, lay people at least, think about energy consumption and whether it's efficient and whether it isn't, is what does it do to my bill? I've heard talk about, and if this is outside the scope of what you guys were focusing on, but I've heard talk about these heat pumps before and have never really had a basic explanation of how they work and what other appliances they maybe replace or how they lower bills. So would it be okay to ask for sort of an overview of what one of these things is?
I can try to take that, and if George needs to translate me again.
Davey, I love it. I love this. This is perfect.
This format is hilarious.
Yes.
Okay, I should back up and say that using electricity to heat something is usually ridiculous because most of our electricity comes from burning something.
Right.
So to burn coal, like we do in Fairbanks, and then make electricity, you only get 36% of the power out of the coal. And then you send it down a transmission line, where you lose even more. Then it comes to your house, and then you burn it in some big resistor. So you only get something like 20 to 30% of the energy in that coal when it was just heat to begin with. So it makes more sense to burn the thing directly in your house so you get 100% of the heat. So that's why electric heating in general is ridiculous until we talk about the renewable situation that we just described. So that being said, there is one exception where electric heat is not ridiculous, and that is a heat pump. So a heat pump is basically a refrigerator, except redefined for a different purpose. So the purpose of your refrigerator is to chill a spot inside. And that's also what air conditioners are. A heat pump is the exact same mechanism, except instead of the purpose being the cold side, the purpose is the warm side. So you're moving heat from the cold side to the warm side, except it's the warm side we care about. So this is not new technology. It's been done. And why would we do this? It requires electricity, right? But it requires less electricity than burning it and transporting it and using it as a resistive heat somewhere else. So on a cold day, let's say your outside air temperature is whatever. I don't want to use a Fairbanks number.
Yeah, no.
What's a cold day for Cordova? Like 20?
Oh, yeah, I'm teens.
Okay, teens. So, okay, it's, 15 degrees outside and your house is a nice warm, 70 degrees. To move a BTU or a kilowatt hour of heat from the outside to the inside still requires electricity. So it's not like a heat pump is free, but it may only take 1 kilowatt hour of electricity to move 4 kilowatt hours of heat. And so the way we describe this is we call it a coefficient of performance. And in that case, the coefficient of performance is 4. These can get really high. They can get into the 7, 8. They can also get really low. In Fairbanks, where it's minus 40 degrees, trying to pull heat out of minus 40 air is ridiculous. So we have COPs of like 1.1.
Sure.
So in that case, with the cost of electricity, it makes no sense. But in Cordova, it can make sense because your winters are milder and your electricity is cheaper and cleaner since you have the hydro. So that's kind of what a heat pump is. Instead of making heat, you're just moving heat. And you are moving heat against a gradient, and so that's why it takes power. But, if the power is relatively inexpensive, it can make sense.
Did you find that people in Cordova, George, knew about these, and are they being used on, or is it still considered a relatively new option? Or did you guys even really talk about this much?
We talked about it with students, and I think that was an eye opener. I'm not sure about the community conversation, but there's other, even with this Arctic 2 program, REAP was one of our partners, Alaska Energy Smart, I think, and that was a big push to get more heat pump awareness into communities, right? Especially coastal Alaska where they have renewables already. It makes a ton of sense. That'd be a good question for Clay.
Yeah.
Do we have any sense on, how many heat pumps or what's it look like? Because getting them from Anchorage to Cordova and installed, would be a pretty easy feat.
Yeah.
Can I just share an anecdote real quick?
Please do.
Halibut Cove. I live in Halibut Cove, right? Not far from Cordova, similar climate. And because of this work with ASAP and the research going on there, I'm like, I'm going to get a heat pump. I'm going to try this out. Everybody's curious. It's amazing. It is absolutely amazing. When it was -9 here this past winter, that thing was performing. The model I have is supposed to be 100% efficient down to -14. About as cold as it ever gets in Cordova, right? That's about the bottom threshold.
Yeah. Wow, that's pretty impressive. It sounds like it's worth learning more about. All right, let's bring this back to your time that was spent in Cordova, which revolved around CCMC. So what did you do there? What did you learn? What were some of the goals as far as looking at that facility? Daisy talked about some of them before, but just so I understand top to bottom what was going on there.
The information we needed from the hospital. Well, first of all, there was installing the meters themselves. And then there was also just laying eyes on the place to look at what were the critical loads, what were the layouts, and what even are viable strategies to handle, to optimize performance during a blackout situation. So for example, you might think, if you're sitting in Fairbanks and you're just looking at blueprints, you might give yourself some misconceptions. But if you're actually there, you're like, oh, there's a heating vent here. You don't want to block that, just things like that. It's helpful to look at. So yeah, the main thing was observing and documenting all the critical loads, looking at the physical layout, and then deciding where to put the metering and having the metering installed.
Okay.
Daisy, could I add to that too?
Yes, please.
The lessons that we learned from Cordova are applicable to communities towns all across the Arctic, all these microgrid communities who have similar infrastructure, or thinking, what could I do to get to be in a position that's more like Cordova, right? Where they are in a better position to deal with these challenges.
Exactly. And even the lower 48, it's like microgridding is kind of a hot topic nowadays, even though the lower 48 is all interconnected, but they're interested in being able to disconnect from their neighbors in times of crisis. If they don't want a rolling blackout that could take out the entire region. If a rolling blackout looks like it might happen, you can disconnect from the grid, power yourself. And I think that's one of the, resilience goals of lower 48 communities. So yeah, definitely if you could keep your hospital powered and know what your critical loads are, that is a goal for everyone.
Sure. And the idea of the microgrid, just maybe, Daisy, define that for the sake of anybody, like, for example, myself, who doesn't necessarily fully understand what that means. Is it just an isolated grid that doesn't, is it that simple, an isolated grid that doesn't connect to any other?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. So a microgrid so micro means small, right? So microgrid means a small grid, which is isolated. In the lower 48 context, it means you have the ability to cut your town off from the rest of the national grid. In the Alaska context, it means you are cut off from the grid, whether you like it or not. So obviously the challenges are bigger. In the lower 48, you might say, oh, I'm a microgrid, but when I need to service something in my power production facility, I can connect to the grid while I do that. In Alaska, completely not an option, which has actually been a challenge because a lot of vendors from outside, they'll come up here and say, yeah, I can, rehaul your power plant. Can you just connect to the grid for, a day so I can do that? And you're like, no, actually, we cannot do that. Like, do you see any transmission lines? No. Okay. So that actually is something a lot of lower 48 people do not understand. But yeah, so that's what a microgrid is. The challenges sound a lot bigger than they are. Like everyone has, or most everyone has experienced a power outage where they turn on their own generator and power their own house. But for a community scale, it's a little bit harder because you have everybody's loads and your generation needs to match the loads all the time. And it's not an emergency situation. This is a 24/7 situation. And it's super critical. If you have a power outage in the middle of winter, then people can die, which is bad. And we talked about storage. Batteries are awesome. And battery technology has come a long way in the last 10 years even. And a lot has been driven by EVs. They have really pushed battery vendors to become really great. But batteries are still not a really big solution. Batteries are better for ride through of small things. Like if you have a lot of wind on your grid and the wind suddenly dies, the battery can pick it up for, an hour until the wind comes back up.
Sure.
But for long-term backups, it's just not an answer. Right now, the national grid has 1% of its capacity storage on batteries, 1%.
Yeah.
So it's not really an answer. The best in Fairbanks can power the core of Fairbanks City for 45 minutes. So again, emergency situation, not a long-term situation. So to keep a microgrid live 365 days a year, 24/7, you can't depend on batteries. It has to be a perfect balancing act all the time. Yeah. Production matches load all the time.
All right. You're nodding, George. Anything to add?
I just think that's
George, translate.
No, I think that's such a cool way to describe it. It's a perfect balancing act, 365 days a year, all the time, 24/7.
And I know that's something that, that CEC has been trying to figure out for as long as we've been in Cordova is, you have this massive need for power in the summer with big processing plants and all that sort of stuff. And then it just kind of dies away in the winter at a time when hydro was less available. There just wasn't as much water flowing. And I can't remember off the top of my head some of the recent changes that happened in that regard, but they've been continuing to drive that hydro number up. So kind of in summary, what would you say that the time spent in Cordova, Daisy, helped you to learn? I mean, what was the outcome?
I have to say one of the things about working with Cordova is I've learned what a community can achieve when they all pull in the same direction and they all mutually support each other. Cordova is also very unique in that way. I think you have a very forward-thinking leadership. You have very forward-thinking leadership at the power utility. That doesn't necessarily happen in other communities. So when everyone has shared goals, that really helps to achieve things. You also have technical capability. Your power plant operators are really outstanding. And so that helps to get a lot of stuff done.
Good. George, how about you? What do you feel was the result of spending the time down there and working through your project?
I think really developing a model and a playbook that's good for the state and other remote communities. Hey, this is a way to get workforce development going, right? And get students involved in the process and understanding the bigger issues. And that can be replicated in every community that wants to lean into it. Cordova is amazing that way because they leaned into it and said, yeah, we want this opportunity for our students because it's important, right? And so other communities that want to lean in that way can do this too.
It's been fun, to see. I can think of a number of situations with CEC, forward thinking on batteries. Daisy, as you said, forward thinking on burying the power lines. And it's not just in the area of power generation. I mean, we were doing things during the pandemic that top officials in the state were coming in and saying, hey, how are you guys doing this and how can we apply it somewhere else? So I'm used to hearing that kind of thing, but I never get tired of hearing that kind of thing. So I'm glad that we could be another example of that. And did you come up with anything, George, maybe you first, were there any results that you feel like you could take to other communities and what you learned from us can help in other places?
I think Cordova is just a prime example of what can be done, right? On a way to utilize these resources or other technologies, but it's not just the technology that solves the issue. You have to have the workforce and the people there to do it, right? Yeah. So I think that's key. The idea that these are not things that just happen overnight, and they do take an ongoing investment. I mean, again, it's like every year you have a new group of students graduating high school, right? So it's a continual thing, and it's really nice to connect with your future workforce when they're in about middle school, because you can kind of scale them up, and by the time they're ready to graduate, they're already teaching the younger students on how this program works. And that's a really good sustaining model. It's not the university or this program coming in, it's the community being able to just, work. It takes a village, right? It takes a village to get the next workers going.
So this trip, this time that you spent in Cordova, I was kind of under the impression you were going around and looking at power plants and looking and, doing a bunch of technical things. And I heard something about installing meters and that kind of thing. But was really the bulk of the focus working with the students, or was it kind of both?
Kind of both. George is the education guy. I'm the power person.
Oh, I see. So two important facets of the same gem. I get it.
To Daisy's point there too. I mean, yes, taking students to the power plants, taking them to the key loads, critical loads, right? Having them work in a place where they can actually do an energy audit, whether it's on a home or a building, and doing these concepts with them. But then to Daisy's point, actually doing the technical infrastructure, working with the power, I mean, those are, there's a lot of players at play here that are trying to make all this happen.
Well, it's a fascinating discussion. I hope that it inspires anybody listening, any Cordovans listening, to continue to be innovative and forward-thinking in this way. Good things certainly seem to come out of it. People seem to notice. And like I said, I love hearing stories about how good we are at doing that kind of thing. Daisy, any final thoughts?
No, I just want to say thank you to the community of Cordova for being so awesome to work with. And if you're ever in Fairbanks, look me up. We have cool things here too.
George, how about you?
Just want to see this continue to work, and really, I love seeing Cordova's model work for other communities around the state.
Yep. Well, I certainly hope that's the case too. I mean, any way we can find to cut down on waste of any type and be more efficient in the layperson's sense, Daisy, not the mathematical sense necessarily, but to do things better, do them cleaner, do them more affordably. That's all good stuff. And I appreciate being able to talk to both of you and learn more about this. So happy trails, and hope we'll see you again.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.
George Reising and Daisy Huang Representing the Arctic 2 project, our guests on today's edition of Town Meeting, which again, because I love science, I thought was fascinating. There was a lot more technical stuff there than I sort of expected, but as Daisy, actually both of them said they were amused by the format we ended up unexpectedly using, where she'd do the technical stuff, and then if George needed to explain it for lay people, he would do that. It was kind of fun. But again, kind of in summary, what the Arctic 2 project has been doing is working to strengthen energy resilience by studying how power is used in one of our community's most important facilities, CCMC. They looked at how electricity and heat are used throughout the year and how surplus hydro could help reduce resilience on diesel. At the same time, the project connected local students with real-world energy work, helping to build a skilled workforce. And the lessons from Cordova, as you heard him say, could help other Alaska communities move toward more reliable and accessible energy. If you joined us late, or if some of it went by quick and you want to listen again or listen a little more carefully, or as I might have to do when Daisy's talking, sometimes do that thing where you can slow the speed down to half so my brain can process that expertise. This program will be going on our YouTube channel. This is for those of you listening to it on the radio on the 15th, but we'll put it in our YouTube archive where all of our talk shows live. YouTube.com/Cordova TV. If you ever want to be notified when one of these comes out, you can do the subscribe and the bell and all that. I still don't fully understand how it all works, but I'm sure anybody younger than me probably does. And if you ever have an idea for a program, you want to suggest a guest, you want to be a guest, just let me know, and we will eagerly set that up. Big thanks, as always, to Cordova Wireless Communications, our local mobile data provider, providing our local talk show, not only keeping the money that we spend with them in town, but also, along with CTC, bringing in all the, I love the $12 million. $12 million a year they bring in to our community, and we don't have to cut anything down or dig anything up or pull it in with a net or anything other than just be customers. What could possibly be easier? All the rest of the programming to which you are entitled in the 10 a.m. hour is coming up. A little later than normal, but hey, what's the point of being a rural Alaskan if we can't be flexible? Schedules are for city folk. So we'll get all that other stuff in. And in the meantime, want to thank you again for tuning in. Thank you, Cordova Wireless Communications. We hope you have a great day.